Hello and welcome to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Today is Wednesday, October 24th. It's also a pleasure to have with us here in the studio Erica Marthage, who, as many of you know, is running for re-election to the post of State's Attorney of Bennington County. Erica is running on both the Democrat and Republican lines. She is being opposed by Christina Rainville, who is running as an independent. And we'll be having Christina Rainville in here tomorrow for a similar interview, so you'll be able to catch both sides of their takes on the issues that are facing the office. Ms. Marthage has served as the Bennington County State's Attorney since 2007, and she is running for re-election to what would be a fourth term if her effort is successful. Before that, she was a prosecuting attorney at the State's Attorney's Office under her predecessor, William Wright. Erica, great to have you back here in the studio again, and welcome back.
Good to see you.
So, what do you see as some of the major issues coming up or looming ahead that your office might be dealing with? I know the opioid issue has been one that's gotten a lot of attention, and we'll talk about that before we're finished today. But in addition to that, are there other questions that you see coming up on the horizon that you're kind of thinking, well, you know, we better get ready for this or that?
Right. So obviously the opioid crisis has been at the forefront of everyone's discussions about what my office does. However, we have a number of other issues that have been discussed quite a bit over the last few years, but are, I think, coming up. They're really ripe for more discussion this coming year. Obviously, everything having to do with the legalization of marijuana. The juvenile justice legislation has evolved a number of times over the past 10 years, and how the two courts, both juvenile and district court, deal with youthful offenders, so individuals under the age of 22 that commit a crime. Those are two of the issues that the state's attorneys have been extremely involved in and vocal about. Last year there was some changes to the bail statute, and obviously with all of the news and information out there about prisoners being housed out of state, bail and how sentences are structured has also been a topic that we've been consulted about. So we spend a fair amount of time as a department at the Capitol testifying and offering situations and opinions about what we've seen on the front lines, so to speak, so that we can help guide the legislature in making the changes that they want to make and making sure that those are actually having the effect we hope. So, you know, I mean, a good example is obviously the marijuana legislation. Right. That law changed and has changed a few times over the last few years, but some of the problems that are coming out of that legislation are only now starting to show up. So, and how we move forward, assuming that that is, again, a topic that's going to be addressed. Trying to figure out how the law and law enforcement can accommodate what the legislature wants to see happen, but still make sure we're not living in a state of absolute mayhem. So.
Yeah, because I guess one of the big issues is the fact that there's not a good roadside test for determining whether or not a driver is impaired or not.
Correct.
Like we have with alcohol at the moment.
Right. And I just was at I spend a lot of time at statewide groups that deal with these issues, and one of them I was at a meeting with the Commissioner of Public Safety, Tom Anderson, called a meeting of all the chiefs and asked some of the state's attorneys to attend. And one of the points that I always had looked at was the idea that we haven't had a fatal accident in Bennington County that was solely based on the person being impaired due to marijuana. I made that comment at the statewide meeting, and apparently there have been a number of fatalities in the state of Vermont after people have consumed only marijuana. So I found that interesting, and I think that'll be a big issue, what the roadside testing looks like. I think it's also going to be a big issue of where are we getting this marijuana? Fentanyl is now turning up in marijuana pretty regularly. So the idea that you can possess certain amounts of marijuana, you can grow certain amounts of marijuana, but there's no mechanism to obtain any marijuana short of having a license to do so.
Well, what do you think might, just to kind of follow up on that for a second, I mean, there's been some talk about whether or not the state should go up the ladder on this a little bit and have a tax and regulate system where, you know, it would be sold under kind of a Colorado-style system where you'd have licensed dealers, that's the right term,
Right.
Selling it. Is your feeling that that's like sort of asking for more trouble, or would that be actually a better way of perhaps dealing with this brave new world that's about to come?
Right. So, so they call their dispensaries. So if you are in the state of Colorado, you can walk into a dispensary and purchase any number of marijuana products. And those have been regulated, and the person selling them, it's licensed. The difference in Vermont is you still would need to essentially purchase your marijuana. If you're not growing it yourself, you need to purchase it from someone that's not regulated and that is not paying any taxes to the state to assist with the infrastructure that comes with legalization, law enforcement. We definitely don't want to forget about prevention. We want to make sure that this is marijuana use is not something that we're approving for use by juveniles. It's harder for me to deal with this topic because I have my personal opinion, which is I just don't want to see yet another substance that juveniles have to deal with saying no to. That said, I understand it's not my job to make the law. It's only my job to enforce however it comes out of the legislature. And my only input on that would be the situation we have now is least optimal. So if we're going to make it legal to possess certain amounts of it, then we really should be regulating what that product looks like that the consumer ends up with. You know, I've had a couple of situations in this county within the last 6 months where individuals have become gravely ill because they have smoked marijuana that was contaminated with other chemicals or agents, not just fentanyl. RAID is one of the common ones. They call it wasping. When you smoke marijuana that's been sprayed with RAID, it's a neurotoxin. So when you're purchasing that, you don't know if the person has done that or not. You also don't know the THC concentration. We're not talking the marijuana from the 60s and 70s. We're talking the marijuana now is very high concentration of THC, triple what it used to be, very high grade. And so the impacts and the effects on people that are actually using it also creates an issue.
So turning to the whole opioid question, I know it's been a big issue for a while. I mean, and it's been an issue in this race here. I guess what do you see the state's attorney should be doing beyond what's already going on in terms of prosecuting cases that come before your office? I mean, is there some additional measure of some sort or another that conceivably could be undertaken, or basically are we kind of, you know, doing everything possible, pressing all the buttons that are out there?
So what we're doing now has been progressively moving in the right direction as far as I'm concerned with prevention, with stopping if someone overdoses, with connecting them with services, if someone's arrested, how to get them connected to services. What needs to be done still we constantly need to be evaluating what more can we be doing. And the role of the state's attorney is extremely limited in what we do. Really, we are only connected to the people that are actually arrested or come into contact with law enforcement. So the idea that the state's attorney can swoop in and fix the opioid problem is preposterous, because we don't have that kind of power. However, what we do have the power to do, and what I've been working hard over the last few years, as the issues have come up, more and more partners have been listening. More and more politicians, more and more people that have money to give. The federal government, it's been a pleasure to hear that we're getting more money to try to deal on the front line with how do we connect people to services? How do we get more services in each county? It's frustrating because we get a lump sum of money for our state as a whole, and then we have to figure out how that money is being divvied up, essentially. And it seems to me like there should be some fairness formula involved, and no offense to people who love Burlington, but Chittenden County should not get all of the resources, and typically they do. If you're below Route 4 in Vermont, we're frequently forgotten. And so when it comes time to be doling out money and resources, the Attorney General has had done some really good work in the last 2 years with the projects that he's been working on. Primarily, it would be, I call it treatment diversion. He calls it Tamarack program. We have been using the Center for Restorative Justice for a couple of years, but we only within the last year were actually getting the funding to support that, and that's through the efforts of TJ Donovan, the Attorney General. So that's been helpful because we're trying to do everything that we can to divert the people that are addicts. So they're just addicts. They are consuming drugs that is harming themselves. Now they have collateral harm, right? I mean, if they have families or parents, or sometimes they shoplift, sometimes they burglarize. Those are the collateral issues. But let's just say they're not the person that's actually trafficking or dealing the heroin. The people that are trafficking or dealing, my goal, and has always been and continues to be, I will make Bennington County the least attractive place to deal drugs. So if you are someone that comes here from somewhere else, maybe you are addicted to heroin, but if you're trafficking heroin into our community, you should do some time in jail. And I want dealers to know that, so that they're not dealing drugs in our community. The hard part is trying to figure out what we do with the people that are local people that deal drugs to support their own habit, but they're also making a living. So there's no simple answer, and sadly, I think people on the outside, they think there's a simple answer, and there really isn't. It's a lot of the people that are addicted to heroin don't want help. They don't want to be addicts, but you can offer them, you can reach out, you can offer assistance, you can try to help them. It's a common theme when you talk to people, particularly parents of people that are addicts in, say, their 20s. They have tried everything. So these are not kids that are overdosing and dying because they don't have access to resources. They do. Their parents have been working desperately to try to get them engaged in resources, in services and treatment and residential programs. But sometimes they go and then immediately are back to using, or sometimes they don't go. And parents can't force a 25-year-old into residential treatment. So, the issue is much bigger than kind of this common misconception that we can hold our arms out to everyone who's addicted to heroin and assume that they're going to take that lifeline. It's not like any other drug that we've dealt with. It's cheap, it's readily available, and one dose can kill you.
Well, one of the ideas that surfaced is the notion of having some sort of special drug court that deals with cases like that, I assume. My understanding is that you're not a fan of that idea. I know that your opponent is, and we'll probably have a chance to talk about that tomorrow, I imagine. But why not a drug court? What's the problem with it?
So the irony that I see with any proponent of drug court is, first of all, you're taking addicts. The people I was just talking about, they're addicts. It doesn't matter if you call it a sickness, a choice that they're making, whatever, they're drug addicts. They're only harming themselves at this point. A drug court assumes we are criminalizing those people because we're bringing them into court, right? And the backbone of a drug court is you engage in what we're telling you to do, or you go to jail. So the drug court model is you are spending money, an inordinate amount of money, I would add, for attorneys, judges, court clerks, people like me, essentially, to stand around and listen to addicts go through every detail of what their sobriety has looked like this week. And you do that every week. And to me, particularly in a state with such limited resources, we definitely don't need to spend more money on more people like me. We need to spend more money on treatment, residential beds, sober living, caseworkers. I like to call them community social workers. The person that when you're the parent of an addict and you are at the end of your rope, you don't know what to do, then you can call this person and say, I don't know what to do. I need help. And they can come together as a group. There's no magic to a drug court. It's a nice catchphrase. It's something that everybody likes to talk about. The bottom line is there are 3 counties in this state that have drug court. And Washington, Chittenden, and Rutland. And any of those counties, if you speak to the people that work in those courts, they will not tell you that those are great and successful. That would be why the Attorney General that was not his agenda. Drug court was not his agenda. He was not looking for money for that. He was looking for money for the Tamarack program, which is the treatment diversion I was talking about. So if you're charged with possession, you come into court once that first time. You're given a citation for possession. You come to court. You immediately meet with someone from the Center for Restorative Justice. I have already signed the paperwork. We don't even see you. We go in the courtroom and deal with the people that are not going to treatment diversion. You take your piece of paper and you go talk directly to the person from CRJ who's doing the screening, who makes follow-up appointment with you. She'll come in and just say to us, this person's going to work with us. And then she does the social work piece of it, helps them get connected to places like Turning Point, to different community organizations, to treatment. She connects them with whether they need a higher level of treatment, the evaluation that can determine that, and is this someone who needs residential or not. Those are where we could use 10 more of those people in Bennington. We don't need another judge in another courtroom to sit and hear, because all I'm going to do is say, what do you think, CRJ person? Do you think this? Because that's what I do now. I'm not the one that's case planning for this person. And the model of drug court is that the offender goes in front of the judge with all of these attorneys and everyone else in the room. Well, I used this week. Okay, well, now you're going to go do some time in jail because you skipped your counseling appointment, and shame on you. I'm going to treat you like a bad toddler and a criminal, right? That's what we're trying to get away from. Aside from the fact that obviously in our state, if you read the news, we don't have the beds to be housing people for violating a treatment contract. So the only thing we can be doing to the low-level possession cases is trying to get them engaged in treatment. If they don't engage, then they come back to court. So the people that show up to CRJ and say, yes, I'm going to work with you, and they follow through on a bunch of their appointments, but then they just stop coming. Then CRJ sends the court a letter saying you need to start the process again. There's no reason whatsoever for, we have 20 cases a week that involve possession. They all go to
just to
diversion.
The regular court.
They go right to CRJ.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because it sounds like this is like a special court that meets like a 1 day a week or something like that. And
it is.
You combine all the cases together in one time.
And the trafficking and sale cases are just those are court cases.
Yeah.
They get dealt with. If they are addicts and users, we still refer them to this social worker to try to get them help with their own addiction if that's what they have a problem with. But we're going to continue their trafficking or sale case in the criminal system. They may get consideration, and frequently they do, if they engage in treatment. But those are different than the people who are merely possessing.
So it sounds like from listening to the whole question of okay, do you prosecute someone who's like a low-level user / dealer in the area, but not maybe a drug kingpin type?
Right.
That you have a certain amount of latitude in the office about how vigorously you want to prosecute or not the individual. Does that sort of latitude extend to other kinds of cases as well, like other cases that may come before you that you can say, well, okay, this person's record is pretty good. Maybe we don't throw the book at them at least this time.
Right.
Is that the way it works?
Yeah, there is a significant amount of latitude within the state's attorney's position, and that's what makes it so important that the person filling those shoes has an actual grasp in reality of the community, the people that are involved. I had a case today that so I review every case that comes through the office. So every case that comes from every agency, and we do about 2,000 cases a year, comes to me. I look at what type of case it is, and then maybe I'll jot down notes. Talk to me about this person. And then I can, if I have backstory, I dealt with this person about 3 years ago, here are the issues here, or you should talk to this person, was their probation officer, or I had a phone call today, a message from someone's mom today that had been arrested for possession, an adult, so not someone that the parent would otherwise have any standing or any need to be coming to court. She just wanted me to know some of the issues that she thinks he's struggling with. And then I try to help guide the process so that we're really addressing those. I mean, the ultimate goal of what I do is to end crime, right? Now, that's not going to happen, but so the best case scenario for me is to have someone that comes into my office via court case, and then I give them some type of sentence that rehabilitates them. They do restitution, reparative board, whatever it is to repay the harm they've done. If it's a serious offense, they do punishment as part of it. But, ultimately I want to see this person come out on the other side of this. Everyone has, at least once in your life, you can look back and say, God, that was a bad choice. Whether you're caught or not, right? Like, even if every one of us probably doesn't necessarily have a criminal record, but you can think of something that, had you been caught, you may have ended up with a criminal record. So, that's kind of the latitude that I'm looking at. We use diversion, deferreds. I just worked with Letha Cipriano from the CRJ to create this pre-charge program, which is, I have the utmost faith in Letha and the law enforcement that work in Bennington County. So if they have a situation, like a good example, I had rows of apartments in this one area that there were some snowball fights taking place, and one of the kids was intentionally throwing ice balls hard and hurting some of the other kids. Kids 13 or 14 years old. Never had any other involvements with my office or with juvenile court or anything like that. Didn't appear to have any school issues or family issues, just throwing ice balls at other kids. Well, you have the parents of the other kids that are really upset because their kids were hurt. Well, what do you do with that? I mean, is that a case that makes sense to bring into juvenile court, where the child gets an attorney, the parent gets an attorney, I'm there, the judge is there, the social worker's there, a guardian ad litem is there? Not really, right? So now the police can refer cases like that, very low level, which may be a crime, may not be a crime, can refer those to the pre-charge program. And the Center for Restorative Justice has whole programs that deal with nothing but juveniles and juvenile behavior, right? Like, so that they can actually use that as a learning opportunity and walk away from that. There is a certain level of amount of value to having the police officer go and talk to you, because, typical 13 and 14-year-old kids are scared when the police come and talk to them. Hopefully that's enough so that they won't get
throw the ice ball the next time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just before we go, I just wanted to ask you a quick question about something we talked about a while ago. I remember about folks who lose their driver's licenses for one reason or another, but still have to travel to work, or maybe they're going to another community to get methadone treatment or some kind of assistance with addiction issues or something like that. But they still have to drive or travel 40, 50 miles or whatever, and they can't drive, and the public transportation may not be convenient. And so maybe the thought process goes, I'll take my chances.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that works, and then sometimes, of course, it doesn't. And so now they sort of drive themselves deeper into the hole. Is there any solution to that, or any fix that your office has been working on or thinking about that might help folks who find themselves in that situation?
Right. So we, a larger scale solution, or at least attempted solution, may look more like some type of public transportation or transportation that is assisting people that don't. So now you can get vouchers to take public transportation. If you're, say, in a methadone program in Rutland and you have children that are involved with the Department of Children and Families, you can get a voucher. But if you're not involved with the Department of Children and Families, you can't. So maybe looking at some of the programs that deal with the transportation for drug treatment, I think, is important, because we are in a rural state. That doesn't address the people, the example I think I used when we discussed it was you have someone who's worked, who lives in Sandgate, who's worked in Bennington for 25 years. And this is based on an actual case that I had. The person gets a DUI too, so he loses his driver's license for 18 months. So someone that lives in Sandgate and works in Bennington, I don't want to see that person lose their job that they've held for 20 plus years to support their family. But the way it is now, there is no, the state of Vermont started using interlock ignition interlocks a number of years ago. They're fairly pricey. You have to pay a fee to use them. What my office has been doing with driving with license suspended is they started a DLS diversion program about 3 years ago. And so I refer, if someone, the example you gave, gets stopped, they took their chances, they get stopped, they already are suspended. Now they have another suspension, and it's a criminal ticket at this, it's a criminal charge at this point. I send them to diversion, where they work out, diversion does a payment plan through the Judicial Bureau, the Department of Motor Vehicles. And as soon as you determine what amount you have to pay, it's typically like up to a maximum of $100 a month, but it usually goes like $20 per ticket. Say you have a bunch of unpaid tickets. You enter into this agreement and you get to keep your license. So now at least you can have a license to drive while you're paying off your fines. As soon as I get word that you have completed whatever it is you need to complete, then I dismiss all of the cases that are attached to that person. And I have a number of cases, and I'm waiting to come out on the other side of these, where they'll have 5 or 6 in a row, but they're driving to work, and it's 8 in the morning, and I really struggle with the idea of preventing that person from driving to work. But I also know, if you hadn't gotten the DUI, you wouldn't be suspended, and I need to think about public safety and whether that makes sense. So, it really is a catch-22, because when you plead guilty or you're convicted of a DLS, there's an additional 30-day suspension. So it really is, and the Department of Motor Vehicles would freak if they heard me say this, but I've been a huge advocate for being able to look at each case and get certain fees lowered or waived, because if you're an individual that has $4,000 or $5,000 in fees, and that's not uncommon, according to the diversion people, that's not uncommon, you could spend the rest of your life trying to pay that off. And my sense is, let's see how much money we can get and give them the opportunity to keep a legal license, rather than have to make that choice. I'm just going to take my chances and,
and see what happens.
Right.
Well, thank you, Erica, for being here today and telling us a little bit about your perspective on all of these issues. And thank you, folks, as well, for tuning in and watching. Hope you found it interesting. Election Day is coming up soon, less than 2 weeks away, November 6th. You can vote now if you want, but hopefully one way or the other you will get to the polls and vote because your vote does count. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again the next time. Have a great day.